Hello and welcome to our Cows and Chaos Feed, Forage and Management Strategies webinar series. My name is Andrea Hansen and I'm a Livestock Extension Specialist with Alberta Agriculture and Forestry working out of the Airdrie office, and I will be your moderator for this evening. Before we start this webinar, I have a couple of housekeeping items to go over. The webinar is being recorded, so if you would like to refer back to it at a later date or share the webinar with someone else, you will receive an email in the next few days that will provide the link to the recording to watch at your leisure. The webinars are all hosted on the Alberta Agriculture and Forestry YouTube channel, so you can head there anytime to view any of the webinars in this series. And the second point is that as the webinar goes along, we welcome your questions. You should see a question panel on your GoToWebinar control panel where you can type and send your queries. And at the end of the webinar, I will read them for our presenter to answer. So with no further ado, let's begin. This webinar is the 7th in a series of webinars that began in July of 2019. This webinar is entitled Feed Testing, What's Important and Why. Our presenter this evening is Barry Yaremcio, Feed Forage Specialist in Stettler with the Ag Info Center. So with that, Barry, please take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. It's a great evening to be inside and not fighting with the weather. And hopefully there's going to be some information in the next hour that will be beneficial to everyone in the future. Second here. She won't. There. Okay, there we go. Sorry, we're getting all the technology in place. What I'd like to talk about tonight is what is the economic impact of feed testing? I'm not an economist, but there'll be a few places within the presentation that'll give you ideas of how subtle changes in the ration can adjust the costs and the effectiveness and how it affects the animal. But the majority of the time is going to be spent on how do you take a sample from the various types of feeds that are available to be used. What do you need to include in a feed test request? And why is it important to test the feeds, and especially what you've got available on the farm and what's purchased either from a neighbor or from a manufacturing outlet such as a feed mill? What are some of the long-term effects of improper nutrition? We'll touch on that briefly at the end as well. So overwintering feed costs make up about 70 to 75% of the total feed cost that you have to pay for to keep a cow going over a year. Dr. Hughes out of North Dakota State University found back in the mid-90s that for every $1 reduction in winter feed costs, you have a $2.48 improvement in profitability. So the multiplier effect is present, especially with this. When you're looking at reducing feed costs, you look at feed waste, feed quality, supplementation, and what he's looking at is if you don't have to supplement with extra grain or buy extra protein, or you get a better use of the feeds, you don't have to put as many acres into forages or use as feed sources, your production costs go down, and on the other side, you've got more land to use for alternate uses. Now, one of the things that we've had out since 1991 is the Cow Bites Ration Balancing Program. It's the 5th version out. It's available from Alberta Agriculture at a cost of $50. Now, I use this program for balancing rations. I know there's a number of people in the industry and private consultants that use it as well. But typically, when I do a set of rations for a farmer, with feed test results, I can save him roughly $50 to $150 in total feed costs over the winter, and that's per cow. So it can make a big difference, especially when hay prices are high and you want to use alternate feeds, or instead of just using hay, you want to go to a straw and grain ration for the pregnant cow. It can be done. And with the help of the Cow Bites program, I can provide recommendations as to what to do and how to do. So let's take it very simply here. Had our farm economist help me with this one, and let's say you've got 10 more open cows this year than what you expected. You can't afford to feed them over the winter. You can sell them now, and these are relatively consistent prices that we'd have on the market within the last week. You'd get roughly $1,100 a cow if you want to sell her right now, a 14 or 1,500 pound cow at 80 to 85 cents. So you'll get some revenue there. You've got 10 less calves to sell, which reduces your income by $1,000 a piece or more. I'm using, or $1,200 or more. And in order to develop the replacement heifers for the first 2 years of their life, that will cost you roughly $10 or $2,000 per animal. So your net loss by not having those extra 10 cows producing the calf, your net loss is $20,800. Animal performance and health is also affected by not having an adequate nutrition program in place. And some of these are so subtle that you may think it's just the year or it's just because that's the way it went. So you might have a reduction in reproductive efficiency. Instead of 3 or 5% open cows, you're at 8. You're going to have an outbreak of a disease, or maybe you've got more calves with sniffles and snotty noses in the fall. The big one that I've seen in the last couple of years with the shortage of vitamins and the poor quality forages that have been rained on is higher calf mortality and morbidity because of the shortage of vitamins in the ration. The ones that you won't see is that reduction in a quarter pound or a third of a pound of growth rate on the calves and replacements compared to what you had the year before. It's very hard to evaluate why that happens. The one that is a little bit easier to see is if you'd have thin cows going into winter, they require more feed to stay warm. A rough estimate is a cow that's 200 pounds light will need an extra 1,400 pounds of hay to stay warm. Not to gain weight, just to stay warm over winter. And of course, on the other side, you're going to have more reasons to call a veterinarian or have the need for additional medications and treatment costs. So all these things go hand in hand with nutrition. Feed testing is the starting point for any feeding program that you wish to develop. So what to test? Using a core sampling tool, you need to forage any kind of bale forage or silage that is available around you. Green feed, round bale silage, hay, straw. Those are all things that need to be done. Silage, if you're as good as the gentleman on the top right-hand corner using a probe to get into a silage pit, there's one way to probe it as he's doing it, but you're much better at it than I am to get that probe into the silage and make it work. So if you're looking at feeds that are still out in the field or you plan to use them in the field, such as swath grazing, what you'd like to do in getting a representative sample there is pick 3 to 5 plants from the middle of the windrow. And if you've got a cocktail mix or a cover crop in there with some brassicas or radishes or turnips, select those plants in the percentage of what they are in the stand. If it's 50% annual cereals and 50% of the cover crop, those plants that you're picking from the windrow, half should be the cover crop and 50% the cereals. You want to go to 20 locations throughout the field. Avoid the unusual areas. If you've got a saline seep or an area that's gumbo type soils, try to stay away from them. When you're getting these materials picked and selected, if you bring them back to the shed or to the shop, if they're wet, place them on a table or a tarp to spread the plants out and let them dry to prevent mold formation. That way you'll have a true sample reflecting what you've actually have. You want to send in the whole plants for analysis. When you look at some of the other types of forages that you have available, crop regrowth, this is a prime year for this, where you've got the silage or green feed been cut. We've had lots of moisture. Many of the crops that I've been seeing driving around, you're seeing a lot of regrowth, be it oats or barley or triticale. And a lot of that right now is in that 4-leaf to the heading stage. And from experience, I know that this material is generally very high in quality, great for lactating cows and calves that need to put on a bit of weight before it gets cold. You treat it the same as a high quality first cut mixed hay. If you do want to sample it and find out what you're getting from that, cut it 3 to 4 inches above the ground, and that reflects what the cow will actually be eating, not the total length of the period. Anytime you are picking material in for a feed test, always cut it above ground. Never submit the roots and dirt on the roots, because that'll just throw your results out the window. So keep it clean, keep it cut, and again, go to 15 to 20 locations. What you want to have is roughly a half a bread bag full of material to be submitted. And again, this regrowth is going to be high in moisture. Lay it out so it dries, and when it is dry enough to submit, then you can send it into the lab. Grazing corn, this is probably one of the toughest ones to determine what the quality is of the feed that the cows are actually eating. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is the quality of the plant itself is different in the different parts of the material. Corn, the cobs and the leaves are the highest quality and typically the first things that the cows are going to eat. The stalk, being the lowest quality, is something that they do not like to eat, but in order to get the efficiency, they need to consume that on the 3rd day of the grazing rotation. So you want to cut the plants off 6 to 12 inches above ground, because that's about all you can expect those cows to eat. You want to have roughly 8 to 10 plants from different parts of the field. And the easiest way to get those samples in a form that you can use is run them through a wood chipper, or if you've got a silage cutter, and you can do just that little bit and then collect the sample easily. Mix up the chopped or the chipped material. Take about half a bread bag full and submit it for analysis. Dormant season grazing. We might be into this before we know it if the snowstorm forecast occurs in the southern part of the province. And again, this is one of the more difficult ones to do, because all you can do is select samples from random areas in the field. Again, go to 15 to 20 locations if possible. Clip the samples to the height that you're expecting the cows to graze, and this will better represent what the cows will actually consume. So, for example, if you cut the samples off too low, 2 things can happen there. You're going to get the bottom portion of the stalk that the cows don't generally eat. That is, again, part of the poorest quality forage in the field. So it'll give you a false indication that your forage consumed by the cows is of less quality than what it actually is. And if it happens to be material that's been for swath grazing, or you've applied a lot of fertilizer onto the field, nitrogen fertilizer into the field, your bottom 4 to 6 inches of the stalk is probably where you're going to have the highest nitrate levels in that material. So again, the sample is a snapshot of the quality that you're taking when you actually grab the sample or cut the sample. The quality will change over time. It generally decreases as the winter continues and the weathering occurs. The most immature plants are typically the ones that have the highest quality, but they will also drop the most quality over time. Pit or chopped bag silage. You need to, again, a representative sample. I know it's sounding like a broken record, but that is the critical part. If you don't do a good job of sampling, your quality of the results coming back will be in question as well. Now, if you're doing this at the time of harvest, and I know we're a little bit past this for the cereal crops, but for the corn that's still standing, it can be done this way. Take a 20-liter pail with a lid, put it into an area close to the unloading area so that when the truckers are dumping a load, or the gentleman that's you're running the tractor, you take a handful out of every second or third load, throw it into the pail, keep it sealed. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is mix the material up and then take half a bread bag of the material for a sample. Squeeze the air out of it and freeze it so that you're maintaining the quality. So if you do a good job of sealing the pit, packing the pit, getting everything done properly, the quality of that material going into the pit should be very close to what you're going to get out. This way, if you have the results back before you start feeding, you can determine how much mineral, what type of mineral, how much grain, or how much supplement you're going to need to meet the animal's requirements. So it's an easy way to get things started a lot earlier than having to wait till you have the pit open and the face is there. But if you haven't collected a sample and you've got the pit open and you've been feeding for a while and you've got an open face, you want to take 20 samples off the face. First thing you do is work your way up and down and across the face in a W or an M pattern, so that you're going up and down and across to get the material from different parts of the pit. Before you take your sample, you want to just rub your hand across the face of the pit, rub all the loose material off so that you actually have to dig with your fingers and get a sample from the packed material. Not oxidation and drying of the sample when the face is exposed will reduce the quality potentially, and it will throw your information off. Again, mix up the contents, take a half a bread bag full for the sample, freeze it, and push the air out of the bag, seal it, and then push the sample into a freezer. It's not only the forages that need to be tested, it's the cereal grains, the pellets, the supplements. It's not only what you grow at home, but it's also material that you have purchased from a supplier or from a neighbor. The sample itself, you're following the same type of procedures. You want a representative sample of the product being used or the product that's being stored. Again, take multiple samples per load and put it into a pail, no different than what the elevator agent does at an elevator. Submit about a quarter bread bag full of material for analysis. So if you've purchased, and that works great for grains. If you purchase feed or supplements, you submit a subsample for analysis. The remainder of the sample, keep it in a sealed pail or a container. Identify the sample by date, invoice, and product, so that if there is something that comes back and has a problem, you can have the information that you need and a sample to take back to your supplier and say, I've got a problem with ergot, or I've got a problem with fusarium. And that way they can't just brush you off and say it's not important. They also are required to take a sample from a purchased feed and keep that sample on hand as well. So it's nice to have it there just for insurance purposes. And once you do seal that pail or container, keep it in a cool, dry area so that it doesn't mold or deteriorate in quality. When you prepare the sample for submission, basically, if you're submitting that a bread bag or a Ziploc container of feed for analysis, they'll try to grind the entire sample, put it into small containers, 30 gram vials, and they will use someplace between 2 and 3 grams out of that sample to do the different analysis at different stations. So that's why you need to have that representative sample coming in. So we've chatted a little bit about this. The high moisture samples or the silage samples, fill the bag half full, squeeze out the air, seal the bag, freeze it, and submit it. And once you go ahead and want to send that sample away, you can use either a courier, mail service, or deliver it in person if you happen to be close to a lab. And using the courier or the priority post through Canada Post, they should receive that sample within a couple days. You want to send them on a Monday or Tuesday if possible, so that if you you want those samples to arrive as fresh as possible to the lab. If you wait till a Thursday or a Friday and it's a long weekend, you might take 5 or 6 days to get that sample to the lab. Not as critical for the dry samples because the quality will not change, but critical for the silages that are frozen that are being submitted. Now, what do you want to request for analysis? The minimum that you need is moisture, protein, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, sodium as the major nutrients, macronutrients for analysis. That is the absolute minimum that is needed to do a reasonable job for a ration. Along with that is the acid detergent fiber or ADF levels, and that is used by mathematical formula to estimate the energy content of that feed. Neutral detergent fiber is something that's grown in importance over the years because we've finally learned how to use it properly. And what we know is animals will eat only a certain amount of neutral detergent fiber before they're full. It's the most difficult part for the animal to digest, so that material may stay resident in the rumen for a couple days, resulting in a lower feed intake overall. So there are limits to how much neutral detergent fiber can be fed. If you have bales that were baled up a little bit tough and they've heated, and you can smell them like tobacco or very sweet, if you take a sample out of the bale, it'll probably be brown, or if it's really bad, it'll be black. The bales are heated. What happens then is some of the soluble protein that is in those bales during that heating process is tied to the fiber component and is not available to the animals. So you need to do that acid detergent insoluble nitrogen or acid detergent insoluble protein test. Nitrates, if you're working with samples that have frozen or if you've got a hailstorm, it's an analysis that needs to be done. If you have one of those heated bales and you're risking nitrate considerations there, with the heating, nitrates can be converted to nitrites and you need to test both of them. Now with the companion crops or cocktail mixes, a lot of them have canolas and turnips and other types of brassicas. Those are sulfur accumulators. If you have more than 0.4% sulfur in the ration, you could run into polio problems. So with some of these mixes, or if you're using a salvage crop of canola that's been hailed, definitely get the sulfur done as well. Trace minerals, copper, manganese, and zinc are generally deficient throughout the entire province. To know how bad, that should be additional analysis done. We know that cobalt and iodine are virtually devoid from any feeds grown in Western Canada. So instead of spending money to find out there's nothing there, and those aren't cheap samples or analysis to be done, supplement 100% of the cobalt and iodine that is required. Most areas in Alberta and Western Canada are very low in selenium. Again, a very difficult analysis to be done due to cost. So again, supplement 100% of the selenium that you need for the animals. A few other things that will show up on a feed test result: sugars, starches, percentage of rumen degradable protein or RDP, and percentages of undegradable protein. Those generally show up with a lot of these packages that are there. Some of these are critically important if you're working with a dairy. The sugars, to a certain extent, for horses, if they have had troubles in the past. And the degradable and undegradable protein is needed for evaluation of the ration when you're looking at growing calves and replacement heifers. Mycotoxins from Fusarium or ergot could be present in grain, and then we're starting to hear stories that there is considerable amount of ergot present in the fields this year. But the easiest way to tell is if you've got a green, blue, red, or pink colored fungus or color in the bales, it could indicate that potential problems exist. Not a guarantee, but it's something to be careful with. So you've got your feed tests and you're trying to figure out exactly what, or excuse me, you're still in the process of taking the sample. Some people use their hands and just grab a sample out of the bale. Others use a core sampling tool. And this is a sample that I actually did a number of years ago, and same bales, same field. With a grab sample, I had 2% less protein and 5 points less energy in that ration. And when I was taking those samples, there was snow on the ground. From the grab samples, when I pulled the material out of the bale, when you looked on the ground, it was green with broken leaves and flowers off of the plant. So the best part of the material in that bale, you're not collecting, you're not capturing as a representative sample, therefore you get that lower quality result. So what's the impact of using that grab sample economically? A cow in an after calving ration needs 65% TDN or energy density and 11% protein. So if we look at the fiber contents and we work backwards to the energy density, and it's 5% lower with the grab sample than with the core sampling tool, what would be expected there is you remove 6 pounds of hay out of that ration and add 6 pounds of barley. If the cost differential between the barley and the hay is 3 cents a pound, with the barley being more expensive, for that 90 days of post-calving period, you're adding $27 in cost of feeding that cow that is not necessary. On the energy side, if you're 2% low in protein, you remove 2 pounds of hay, you add 2 pounds of peas. Again, the peas being more expensive, 5 cents a pound differential, that's adding another 10 cents per day on your cost. So 27 and 9 is 36. So there's $36 a head just because you didn't use a core sampling tool. The accuracy of analysis, when you're requesting your analysis, there's 2 different systems. One's a near infrared spectrometry or NIR, and the one that has been a standard for years is wet chemistry. You can see that there's no difference between the two when you've got the protein and the fibers, ADF and NVF, they're virtually identical. But when you look at the calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, there are some significant differences, especially in that calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. When you can see a 300% difference in the calcium, 200% difference in the phosphorus, and again about 200% difference in the magnesium, you got to question yourself, how does that impact what I need to do to supplement that ration? So if we use the NIR analysis only, if I was doing the ration and that's the only information I had, I would be adding 2 ounces of limestone to that cow's ration per day to bring my calcium and phosphorus ratio in line. Using the numbers from the wet chemistry, your limestone requirement to supply extra calcium is 4 ounces a day, plus you're going to need 1 ounce of magnesium. Doesn't seem to be a big difference there in total cost or what you're applying, but if you don't have the proper calcium phosphorus ratio and magnesium amount in the ration, downer cows, milk fever, and winter tetanies are something that you are going to have to be concerned with. I've been talking about feed all the time, but that's only half the equation. Water has to be considered in this evaluation as well. So in 2017, up towards Turtleford, Saskatchewan, they had 200 cows die on a provincial grazing reserve. Basically, they moved the animals in. 4 days later, they came back and checked them, and they found these 200 dead cows. They weren't sure what was happening, so they evaluated the water and found that the sulfate levels were very high, resulting in the polio that killed the cows. The temperatures were high, so that there was a lot of water evaporation from the dugouts. They hadn't filled properly. Rainfall was minimal, so there was no recharge of the water source. So when they tested the total dissolved solids, electrical conductivity, and mineral content, they found where the problems were. And for the cows that did not die, or the calves that didn't die, it took them a long time to get back and be healthy and start gaining weight or maintaining the condition after they pulled them out of that pasture. So Saskatchewan agriculture decided to do some bunch of sampling out of the dugout waters that were present in the province. And they found that 49%, or roughly half of them, were not acceptable for use in not acceptable for use in raising livestock over the summer. Only 40% were good to satisfactory, and 12% were in the caution range. And the reason for that is water intake changes with the temperature and the stage of production in the animal. A lactating cow at 25 degrees Celsius will drink roughly 63 liters of water a day. If you look at the sulfur concentration in the water, you can see that 2,000 milligrams per liter is about where you want to limit the concentration at the lower water intake, because you're going to get 0.13 to 0.15% sulfur from the ration itself. 3,000 ppm over the limit, even just with the water. When it gets hot, 34 degrees Celsius, the water consumption basically doubles, and your safe level is down to 1,000 milligrams per liter. So it's a moving target. So water quality can impact free choice salt consumption, the amount of total feed intake, interfere with the absorption of other nutrients that are in the ration, and create health problems. So for example, if your sodium content in the water is above 300 parts per million, that will meet the salt requirements of the cow on a daily basis. And sodium makes up 39% of the weight of salt. So if they're drinking the water at 300 ppm or milligrams per liter, they will not come to the salt station, or they will do it very infrequently. If you're high in total dissolved solids and electrical conductivity is high, they don't like the water, they will not drink as much, therefore they won't eat as much. So it's something that has to be considered, especially if you're thinking, why am I having these problems? Maybe it's not the feed, maybe it's the water. Salvage crops, going back to what we have available for feed, something that's hail damaged, or in areas of the province for the last couple of years, there's been a deficiency of moisture. These crops can be cut for feed. Use the same procedures as what you do for taking samples from the dormant grazing season situation. 2-year-old hay, not much of it around right now, but it's something that will show up over time. There's going to be huge changes in bale weight. It can be any place from 150 to 200 pounds of bale lower than when it was made. Your protein and energy contents will be down due to weathering and the basically leaching out of the soluble carbohydrates and soluble proteins out of the feed. Your acid detergent fiber and neutral detergent fibers will go up because of the loss of the other nutrients. And basically, your last year's results, you might as well use that to line the bird cage, retest the bales, and see what you actually have. If you've got 4 inches of spoilage on the outside of that bale, and we're looking at a 5-foot bale, that will be roughly 22 to 24% of the total bale weight being affected by the damage. With the older hay and feed that's been stored outside, what you can find is a large difference in the amount of feed refusal, and this will also impact the nutrition of the animal. So if you've got bales that are stored inside under a hay shed, you'll typically see 15.5% waste. If you're using large round bales that are stored on the ground with no cover, they've been out there for a year, you can see that the waste has gone up by 17%. So when I look around this year with a lot of the bales being covered by plastic, either individually wrapped or in tubes, it's no different than having them inside of a shed, as long as that plastic is maintained and no holes are present. Older hay, again, you're going to have a reduction in the digestibility of that feed. 10% more of that feed will not be digested and go through the system. And when they looked at it in the test tube, they were only to recover roughly 45 to 50% of the nutrients that are there. So when you start looking at using these older hay supplies, and the guy's asking you for full price compared to hay from this year, there needs to be a discount because the value you're getting out of that forage is definitely less. Feed waste. When the hay is stored outside, I'm going to touch with this one a little bit more because this is something where you can really make a big difference on how much feed you're going to need in the winter and your overall feeding cost. If you're feeding hay that's been on the ground and unprotected from the weather, you're going to get 24, 25% waste, and under a shed down to 12%. This work was out of the States from 1985. I did a master's degree in 2007 using a bale processor versus unrolling. We found that the bale processor lost 19%, or 19% of the feed was wasted. With the bale unroller, it was only 13%. But the big thing is you were losing 35% of the protein, 35 or 30% of the calcium. So using a feed processor, you need to recalculate what these cows are actually getting from the ration, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail in future seminars. So yes, feed testing takes time and it is expensive to actually lay out the cash on the short run, but it's important to develop the balanced rations for different groups or types of animals. What we've talked about here, yes, I've basically looked at beef cattle because that's what I deal with mainly, but this can also apply to horses and sheep and llamas and alpacas and any of the other ungulates that are out there. So this is not just for beef cattle. This goes for all the different animals. Economic advantages can be huge, especially when feed costs are high. And in a situation where you have a shortage of good quality feed, or you need to use some poor quality feeds, using the feed test results and using the feeds judiciously over the winter feeding period can dramatically reduce your feeding costs. Like I mentioned before, any place from $50 to $150 a cow. And the other thing that will happen is your health status and production by the animals will improve. My contact information is here. If you need anything, feel free to either email or contact me directly by phone, and be more than happy to help you out. And Andrea, I think I am just about to the point where you're going to be taking over in 30 seconds. The last slide I have is there's a YouTube video put out by Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. It's 3 minutes long, but it gives you a very good visual on how to take the samples when you're using a core sampling tool. You're always working on the bales between the twines instead of coming in from the flat side. And it's something that's worth watching if you've never feed tested before. So Andrea, with that, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our participants to type in and submit any questions that you have about our topic tonight. As I'm waiting to see if there are any questions, I am going to just, let's see if I can change my presenter. So I just want to let you know a little bit about the Alberta Beef Forage and Grazing Center, or what some of us have kind of dubbed the ABFGC, or the center. Let's see, this isn't, there we go. Okay, this center is roughly based out of Lacombe, and it's an agreement between the Alberta Beef Producers, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Oh, is that better? Can people hear me better now? Sorry. And Alberta Agriculture and Forestry. The mission of the center is to develop and transfer knowledge, innovation processes, and tools to improve the forage beef industry. And the ABFGC is based off the research extension group that was called the Western Forage Beef Group, that operated from the mid-1990s to the 2000s. The center utilizes existing staff from Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, as well as the Alberta Beef Producers. And the ABFGC is now on social media. So I would really encourage any of you who tweet and do all those fun things to join and get regular updates and tweets from those who are contributing. And so you can follow with hashtag ABFGC. So that's just a really quick overview of the Alberta Beef Forage and Grazing Center. There are some other great resources out there for more information and support, and I encourage you to check these out. Lastly, don't forget to look after yourself and family first. In the last webinar, I did give this little bit of a speech before, but I think it is okay to say it again. When a stewardess goes through that speech at the start of an air flight and gets to the part about the oxygen masks, we're always told to put our mask on first before helping our dependents. And I think the same can be said for our farms and ranches as well. If we're not looking after ourselves and family first, the farm will not be able to work for us. A final resource every farmer or rancher in Alberta should know about and belong to are your local forage and research associations. These associations are great sources of information at the regional level. Become a member of the association closest to you, but I also encourage you to maybe look further afield and get information from some of the other forage and research associations as well. For the small membership fee, the information that you get is definitely worth it. And as well, don't forget to follow the Alberta Beef Forage and Grazing Center as well. So I do have a question in here, and that is, does barley and oats lose quality over time?
Now, if you're talking about barley or oat grain, if they're combined dry, your sample should retain its quality for a number of years. If you're looking at barley green feed and oat green feed, those will lose quality over time if they're left out in the open, either for swath grazing or bales that are stored out over winter in the under the weather, not under cover.
Okay. What results do acid detergent and soluble nitrogen come in, and how do you calculate the change in the feed?
To get the acid detergent insoluble nitrogen results, it's a specific test that has to be requested when you're submitting the sample to the lab. When you get the results back, and I'll cover this in the next webinar on what do you do with the test results when you get there. But to answer the question, there will be 3 or 4 different values that are being supplied for protein levels. So, for example, the first one that you will get on the test result, and I'm just quickly grabbing one here on my desk, is your crude protein. That'll give you the total nitrogen multiplied by 6.25 to give you your protein content. The next one is ADICP or ADIN, which is a percentage of the total protein that is not available to the animal. It's tied up by the fiber. It will then tell you that it's a percentage of the total protein that's lost, and then the last number is an adjusted or available crude protein level, so that if you started off with 15% protein, you've got X percentage of acid detergent and soluble nitrogen. The value that you're going to get on the bottom is adjusted CP or available crude protein, and that is the number that you would want to use. Sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 13%, but you have to have a significant amount of spoilage in that hay to get that unavailable protein in the fiber.
Okay. Have you seen any results on the wrapped bales put up in late August and September and expected to ferment in the bags?
Late September or late August, early September, those bales should be fermenting for any place from 4 to 5 weeks. They have not finished fermenting yet, and I have not seen any sample results so far, but material that was put up a little bit earlier, be it dry hay or in the bag, depends on, you know, when the crop was cut, how much time it was spent being rained and turned. But the trend that I'm seeing this year, because of the rain, the lack of moisture, the late cutting, is protein is down roughly 25% compared to normal. So alfalfa grass hay that's usually in that 12 to 14% range is coming back at 7 to 8. Fiber levels are up, energy levels are down. So there are going to be a lot more problems feeding animals properly this winter with forages that are available. It will require more supplementation with grain and with additional protein to meet the requirements of these animals.
Okay. So related to the core sampler, where could I find a core sampler for testing bales?
The core sampling tools are available from most counties or municipal district offices or special areas. Most of them have a sampling tool available. Feed mills, sales representative from feed mills, some veterinary clinics also have them available. But there's also a supplier available out of Yaremcio where you can, if you need to, buy one for your personal use.
Okay, I'd maybe add as well, Barry, another reason to join the Forage and Research Associations. I think some of them maybe have some that can be put out on loan as well.
They basically all of them have tools that are available for sampling as well. Thank you for catching that. And if necessary, some of them will provide staff to help you with that process.
Okay, perfect. So I don't see any further questions at this time. But before I sign off, I'm just going to turn the mic back to Barry and ask if there's one or two main points that you'd like to emphasize about your talk.
When you do the sampling and you get the feed test results back, and I know we're getting a little bit ahead of what we've talked about, but it can be very daunting to look at a page that has 25 or 30 different numbers on it and you're not sure what you can do with those numbers. There are a couple feed value calculators and feed evaluators on the Beef Cattle Resource Research Council's website under feed testing that you can do some work yourself there. But the easiest way is phone somebody here at the Ag Info Center and we'll help you evaluate what the feed tests are saying. Talk to your feed mill nutritionist, talk to your feed salesman, the people at the forage associations. There's a lot of, or even a private consultant if you want to go that route. But it'd be a shame if the results are paid for and all you do is throw them in a file and you don't use them. One thing that I've learned over the years is sometimes a small change will make a big difference. There was one situation where a person was running a large number of cows and he was having about 15% open cow rate, and he had a 10-year supply of feed test results, including the micronutrients, in file. So they sent me those results. I looked at them, found out that only one nutrient was really out of whack, and that was the manganese levels. They were 6 or 7 times higher than normal. And when we pulled the manganese out of the custom supplement that they were feeding or out of their mineral package, that brought the ratios back down into more tolerable levels, and his open cow rate went down to 3%. So it's not that you're going to have a large change to make every time. Sometimes a simple little thing like that will make all the difference in the world.
Okay. Just as another question, would this kind of topic tonight be applicable for other livestock other than cattle?
All species, chickens, pigs, all the monogastrics, basically you're working with grains, but feed testing is critical for them. Some of the pigs and chickens and dairy, they even go into the amino acid evaluation. But you know what we talked tonight about cattle, horses, sheep, llamas, alpacas, all the other ruminant species or ungulates, this applies to everything that's being fed on the farm.
Okay. So I don't see any more questions coming in. I'd like to thank those who registered and watched the webinar this evening. This webinar was recorded, so if there's anything you would like to go over later, an email will be sent to you in the next few days with a link to the AF's YouTube page, where you will find all of the webinars on this series. After you close out of this webinar, you will be prompted to complete a 3-question survey, which I would encourage you to fill out. Please let us know what worked, what didn't work for you on this webinar, as well as any future topics you would like to suggest for webinars in our future. I would also, again, like to thank Barry for his practical information, and I want to let everyone know that the next webinar will be held 2 weeks from now, which is, good grief, I don't have this up. So it will be on October 10th, and I believe Barry will be speaking again on that one. It will be starting at 7:30, and Barry, can you remember what the topic is?
The topic is, now that you've got your feed test results back, what do the numbers mean and how do I use them?
Great, thank you. Okay, so if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to register for that seminar as well. And that way you can get the reminder to watch in real time or at least receive the link after the webinar. So with that, good night, everyone. All the best with fall activities. Here's hoping that the weatherman has got it wrong for the snow this weekend. And hey, let's be careful out there.